The test is in 4-part, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. Now look at Part 1.
Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between Harry and Andrea, two students who have just finished their final exams. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi Andrea, how are you feeling now that exams are over?
It's fantastic to have finished, isn't it? And to sleep in every morning. What about you?
Well, I've been catching up on sleep too, but I've got a lot to do before I leave for England. Perhaps you could give me some advice. I've got a lot of things I can't possibly take back with me, but I don't know what to do with them.
Well, it depends on what sort of things they are and whether you're thinking of giving them away or selling them.
Well, almost everything. Furniture, the fridge and other kitchen stuff that I bought from the previous tenant. But the new people have already got what they need, so they're not interested in buying stuff from me. I can't afford to give it away, but I'm not sure how to sell it all. Oh, and there are some clothes and books as well.
Why can't you take them?
The books are really heavy. It's so expensive if you exceed the airline baggage allowance. And the clothes just won't all fit in my suitcase. It's amazing how much stuff I've accumulated since I've been here. Anyway, I don't think I'll need as many summer clothes in England as I have here in Australia.
I see. Well, there are several alternatives. First of all, you could put up notices around the university about the books. You know, on the notice boards in the Student Union building and in the economics department. Anywhere second and third year students will see them. People are always keen to buy cheap textbooks.
OK, what should I say on the notices?
Just put the titles, authors and price you want, your name of course, and maybe put your phone number on those little tear-off tags.
That's a good idea. And what about the furniture?
You could try doing the same thing, but usually students are away all summer, so they don't want to buy furniture now. Another place to try might be a second-hand shop. Someone from the shop will usually come around and give you a free quote, and then you can decide. But you don't usually get much money for that sort of stuff.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10.
Another alternative is to put an advertisement in the Trading Post. Do you know that paper? It comes out every week advertising things people want to sell. You have to pay to put the advert in and then hope people phone. Give them as much information as possible, and if they're interested, invite them to come and have a look. The hard part is agreeing on a price.
No, I haven't seen the Trading Post, but I should have a look at it. And I could advertise the fridge, the microwave and the furniture. But the kitchen stuff isn't really that good. You know, old cutlery, a few pots and pans and some plates and things. What shall I do with them?
Well, another option is to donate the kitchen things to a charity shop. You know, like the Salvation Army or St. Vincent de Paul. Why don't you get a second-hand shop to give you a quote first?
Yes, I could do that. Find out how much they'll give me and then decide whether to sell them or give them away. But I've still got the clothes.
A charity shop will take them too, as long as they're in good condition. And even though you don't get any money, at least you know that someone who really deserves some help has benefited.
That's a good point. I'll advertise the expensive stuff, the furniture, and donate the clothes and kitchen stuff. Let's go and buy a trading post and you can help me write the advert.
Well, actually, I'm interested in buying the fridge and the microwave, depending on the price, of course.
OK, let's see how good you are at bargaining.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a committee member giving a talk to a nature club about coming events. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hi everyone, it's good to see such a big turnout at our Nature Club session for June. Just before we start this evening's workshop, I'd like to draw your attention to what we have in store for you in the second half of the year. First of all, the guided bushwalk. This is always a favourite. Starting out on the Springvale Plateau and continuing down into a section of the State Conservation Area. Last year, we invited children aged 8 and over if they came with a parent, but the track has been washed out in a few places since then and it can be quite rough. So, this year we considered restricting it to adults only. However, on reconsideration, the committee has now decided to recommend it for all bushwalkers who are over the age of 12. Another very popular option is the bird observation walk. We'll be searching for both migratory and native birds as we walk through tidal marshlands and mangroves, and you can expect to get your feet uncomfortably wet and muddy if you don't wear rubber boots. These are a must. The leader will have a strong pair of binoculars, so we'll rely on her to name the species for us. And we've ordered some bird identification books that you may wish to purchase at a later date. From the bush to the swamp and now to the sand dunes. Our leader will help us identify plants native to the local area as well as some invasive weed species. We'll be asking for volunteers to help pull out the weeds where possible, so a pair of sturdy gardening gloves is essential. Spades and other tools will be provided. It could get very hot and you'll need water, plenty of it, but a local business owner is willing to provide bottled water free of charge. The next outing, Bush Tucker, is a new one. Have you ever wondered what life in this country would have been like 200 to 2,000 years ago? Well, come on this trip and you'll find out how the indigenous inhabitants used local plants as food and medicine. Because lunch is included in this trip, there will be a small charge per person. We had originally thought $7 would cover the basics, sausages and bread followed by tea and coffee, but then we thought a few different cuts of meat and salad would be nice, and that brought the price up to $12 a head. At one stage we even contemplated including seafood, but that would have been a bit too expensive, around $15, so meat and salad it is. We expect this to be a popular event, so we'll need advance bookings to organise the catering. Please let us know your intentions by the 10th of November and be aware that we'll require prepayment by the 15th of November. You can still change your mind and get a refund up to the 25th of November, but after that date, if you pull out, you'll forfeit the money paid.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Well now, if you can give me a few more minutes of your time, I'll fill in a few details for you. The bushwalk, led by Glenn Ford, is first up in July, on the 2nd of the month. It'll start from Springvale as usual, but this year we'll be setting off in the morning at 9:15 and we'll get back at 1 in the afternoon. The birdwatching expedition is on the 10th of September at Camford, and the leader is the president of the Nature Club, our very own Joy Black. If you have any questions at all about bird life, Joy is the person to ask. This is a twilight outing from 4:30 to 6:30. Next up is the trip to the sand dunes on the 26th of November with Rex Rose. A bit of an early start, especially for those of you with a fair way to travel, but we'll meet at the observation hut at 8:30. That's the observation hut, 8:30 till 10:30. And even at that time of the morning, it'll be very hot, so come prepared. The last trip on the program is the Bush Tucker excursion on the 3rd of December with Ranger Jim Kerr. This will be at Carson Hills, and the presentation and demonstration will take place from 10 a.m. till 11:30, but be prepared to stay on for the barbecue and Bush Tucker lunch at 12 o'clock. I expect we'll wind up at 2, and you can head for home at that time. Well, that's all I have to tell you. A booklet will be mailed out to you later with those events, dates and times, but don't wait, put them on your calendar now.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 3.
You will hear a woman inquiring about a media studies program. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
I'm looking for some advice about doing a master's degree in media studies. Am I at the right place?
Yes, my name's Mark. I'm head of the Media Studies course. Nice to meet you. And you are?
I'm Louise. Nice to meet you too.
So how can I help you?
Well, I've seen the prospectus for the course, but I'm still a bit confused about a few things and about some of the options for studying.
What's your situation at the moment? Are you working?
Yes, I've been working as a journalist for a local newspaper for the last 3 months. Prior to that, I had 2 jobs in the media, at a small local radio station for about 2 years and at a TV station for about 4 years. So I've worked in media for about 6 years in total.
OK, well that's useful if you want to do the course. What's your motivation to do further study?
I enjoy my job a lot at the moment, but I feel the opportunities for promotion are quite limited. It's not that I think a master's will help with this, though. I'll probably leave my job, maybe to go into TV or something, but basically I think wherever I end up going in the future, employers prefer to see someone with postgraduate qualifications these days.
And are you intending to study full-time?
Well, I'd really like to keep working as I need an income.
What are the options for me if I want to work while studying?
You could do certain modules over a number of years if you like. It's up to you how many you do. Basically, you get credits for the ones that you complete. People usually do the Masters in anything from 18 months up until 4 years. It depends on your time. If you wanted a fixed schedule and attendance and did it part-time, then that would be a total of 3 years.
So what's the admission criteria to join the course?
Well, there are a few things that are useful but not essential. But there are some requirements. Usually to join a Masters, people must have a bachelor's degree. But we are prepared to overlook this if someone has enough work experience. But you must have one or the other. It's useful if you have research experience, as you have to complete a thesis, but we can train you on this if not. It is essential that you have motivation if you want to join the course, as it is very demanding.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a talk on a social history of the East End of London. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In the last few weeks, we've been looking at various aspects of the social history of London. And this morning, we're continuing with a look at life in the area called the East End. I'll start with a brief history of the district and then focus on life in the first half of the 20th century. Back in the 1st to the 4th centuries AD, when the Romans controlled England, London grew into a town of 45,000 people, and what's now the East End, the area by the River Thames and along the road heading north-east from London to the coast, consisted of farmland with crops and livestock, which helped to feed that population. The Romans left in 410, at the beginning of the 5th century, and from then onwards, the country suffered a series of invasions by tribes from present-day Germany and Denmark, the Angles, Saxons and Jutes, many of whom settled in the East End. The technology they introduced meant that metal and leather goods were produced there for the first time. And as the East End was by the river, ships could transport goods between there and foreign markets. In the 11th century, in 1066 to be precise, the Normans conquered England, and during the next few centuries London became one of the most powerful and prosperous cities in Europe. The East End benefited from this, and because there were fewer restrictions there than in the city itself, plenty of newcomers settled there from abroad, bringing their skills as workers, merchants or moneylenders during the next few hundred years. In the 16th century, the first dock was dug, where ships were constructed, eventually making the East End the focus of massive international trade. And in the late 16th century, when much of the rest of England was suffering economically, a lot of agricultural workers came to the East End to look for alternative work. In the 17th century, the East End was still a series of separate, semi-rural settlements. There was a shortage of accommodation, so marshland was drained and built on to house the large numbers of people now living there. By the 19th century, London was the busiest port in the world, and this became the main source of employment in the East End. Those who could afford to live in more pleasant surroundings moved out, and the area became one where the vast majority of people lived in extreme poverty and suffered from appalling sanitary conditions. That brief outline takes us to the beginning of the 20th century, and now we'll turn to housing. At the beginning of the century, living conditions for the majority of working people in East London were very basic indeed. Houses were crowded closely together and usually very badly built because there was no regulation. But the poor and needy were attracted by the possibility of work, and they had to be housed. It was the availability rather than the condition of the housing that was the major concern for tenants and landlords alike. Few houses had electricity at this time, so other sources of power were used, like coal for the fires which heated perhaps just one room. Of course, the smoke from these contributed a great deal to the air pollution for which London used to be famous. A tiny, damp, unhealthy house like this might well be occupied by 2 full families, possibly including several children, grandparents, aunts and uncles. Now, before I go on to health implications of this way of life, I'll say something about food and nutrition.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.